And next up on my Steam library, I'm playing Skyshine's Bedlam. Skyshine's Bedlam is a turn-based action strategy game. It's set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and the objective of the game is to journey from the main city that you start in across the post-apocalyptic wasteland to find a new city, or a fabled, legendary, rumoured new city on the other side of the post-apocalyptic wasteland. It was a Kickstarter project. It got enough backing. I think it got about £150,000 or dollars, I can't remember, as backing, and has come about. It's got a very nice art style, which I particularly like because it's heavily influenced by sort of 2000 AD and heavy metal, those kind of fantasy sci-fi titles, comics from like the early 80s, early 90s, that sort of era. Even a little Mobius looking as well on the art style. Definitely influenced by those kind of comics, and I like that a lot. That appeals to me. And if you're a fan of those kind of comics and those kind of art, the art style will definitely appeal to you. As well as the art style, there's some other 2000 AD influences, particularly Judge Dredd influences, like this post-apocalyptic wasteland you've got to travel across could, in all but name, is the Cursed Earth. The city you're leaving is, in all but name, Mega City 1. And it's the different factions in the game are like mutants, cyborgs, robots, which come across as very much as the way they do in Judge Dredd. So definitely the 2000 AD influences are there all through the game. The gameplay is simply moving from node to node on the map across the post-apocalyptic wasteland. Like each node you're in, you usually get a choice of 2, sometimes only 1, sometimes 3, but mostly like you can move 2 different to 2 other different nodes from the one you're on, and you go across the post-apocalyptic wasteland like that. You can have encounters along the way. They're kind of random if you have an encounter while you're traveling, but if you're landing on a particular node, that is a specific thing, and some of the nodes are resources, stockpiles, combat, where you know you're going to get a fight, and then you will get some combat when you land on those. The combat is turn-based. It's based on the Banner Saga engine, and if you played Banner Saga, and I've played the first one, and I've got the second in my Steam library, so I will be getting to the second one soon enough. But the first one I've played and I liked it very much, and if you've played it, you will instantly recognise how the combat looks. So it's it's actually based on, it's in using the Banner Saga engine, so you'll be familiar with the combat. But if you're not, then it's basically a turn-based combat on a tiled field of square tiles, and you can move, you can attack, you can use abilities from your vehicle, the dozer they call it, the vehicle that's carrying you across the post-apocalyptic wasteland. And you have a squad of like 4 people you take into combat each time from your crew. Your crew you pick kind of at the start what sort of mix of crew members you want, and I'll get into that later. But basically, yeah, turn-based combat on a square tiled field based on the Banner Saga engine. So as you travel across the post-apocalyptic wasteland in your dozer, you have 3 resources that are gonna come into play. There is meat, which is used to feed your crew and your passengers. You are carrying, like, to start with, as well as the crew you use for combat, you're carrying like 1,500 passengers who you're supposed to be taking to this new city. And every time you move, every move you make, you will use a certain amount of meat and a certain amount of fuel, which is called crude. So every move, it will tell you how much meat and how much crude it will take to make that move. And you will need to replenish these resources along the way, because you will have nowhere near enough at the beginning of the game to make it all the way across. So that's why you have like nodes that are stockpiles, like crude stockpiles or meat stockpiles, which you might want to visit in order to replenish your dozer's supply. And also, you, as a reward for winning in combat, you will get some meat and some crude. And the third item, the third resource, is power cells. Now, power cells aren't used to move, but they are used for special abilities during combat. These are weapons from your dozer which can be used in combat, and they require a certain number of power cells to be used. They're usually quite powerful, and they can like have they're usually quite large area of effect weapons which can take out multiple enemies in one hit. But you can only use each one once during any combat engagement, and you usually have like 2 and possibly up more as you go along if you have encounters where you can collect extra weapons. And that resource is quite important, because you will need to use those as the fights go on. The further you get in the map, the enemy you're fighting, the mutant king, their threat level goes up. It's a bit like FTL, if you played that. The further you go along, the more combat you win, the more fights you win, the more elevated the enemy's threat level gets, and the harder the fights become. And by the time you're getting close to the end, where their elevated threat level is getting quite high, you'll be coming up against multiple opponents, all with quite high health, at least high health compared to what you're used to fighting at the beginning. And you will need to use these dozer abilities to take out, or at least whittle down as much as possible, like a big group, because it would be very difficult without them. And that's usually what does for you. That's usually what kills you in the end, is if you don't have these abilities. The meat is used to heal you, as well as when you move to feed your crew and passengers. In combat, you can heal using meat. So meat is another one. If you run out of it, you can still move, because once you run out of meat, your passengers will start dying with each move. But you usually have, several, 1,500 to start with, so you can afford to lose some. But the worst thing about having no meat is you can't heal your crew while in combat, and that makes combat extremely difficult as well. So the crew, like I say, you get 4 to take into combat. There are 4 classes. There are a sniper, a melee dude with a shield, which they call a frontliner. Then there's a gunslinger who's got like 2 sort of semi-automatic submachine guns, and then there's a shotgun guy. So they're kind of long range, high damage, short range, high damage, and mid range, mid damage kind of splits between the different crew members. So you can drag and drop those crew members into your battle team when combat starts, and these crew members they level up as they get kills. And there are 3 types: rookies, veterans, and elites. This is one of the things you get to pick at the beginning, like what you want your crew comprised of, how many elites, how many rookies, how many veterans. And as they get kills in combat during the game, they will level up. So a rookie can become a veteran, but I don't think a veteran can become an elite. An elite is a special class which you can pick up more of along the way. There are other encounters where you fight an elite, and if you beat them, they can join your crew. But once the rookies become a veteran, he can still level up, and you get points to spend each time they level. You can spend it on their damage, or their health, or their movement. So that's the combat. You sort of pick your crew, 4-man crew, and try and get a balance, and then play as tactically as possible during the combat. The tile set comes out. There's usually some cover to hide behind. There's usually some maybe some explosive barrels which you can use to help shoot them and do damage to enemies without having to put yourself in danger. So that's the combat is quite tactical. It shows you on each person, each enemy, and you, like the damage you will do, the damage that will be done to you, how far you can move, what your weapon range is. So all of the combat turn-based and based on just basically picking the right crew to be able to take on and playing as tactically as possible to take on the enemies you've got. If your crew all dies, you can fight. Well, if your battle team all cries, you can try and fight it again, picking 4 new ones. If you lose all your crew and you can't fight any combat, then that's it, game over. If you run out of crude, so you can't move your dozer, that's game over as well. So there are a couple of different fail conditions, and when you do fail, when the game's over, you have to start again. You're back to the beginning. You have another run. It's a little roguelite in that sense, where death is permanent. If a crew member dies during the combat, that death is permanent. That crew member's gone for good. But like I say, more can be recruited along the way. So that's permadeath for the crew members, and when you fail, you're back to the beginning for another run, or you can start off from where you last were, but usually by the time you're failing, by the time you've got to the point where you're done, you can't get any, then the previous position where you started from is pretty much untenable as well. So it's always best to just start a new run and see how far you get the next time. So I found it quite difficult. There are 3 difficulty settings: easy, normal, and Bedlam. And I was playing on normal, and I was getting about halfway through the wasteland, and I was just getting to points where the fights were just getting too hard. I was coming up against too many enemies, and I didn't have the resources necessary. I didn't have the meat to heal my guys. I didn't have the power cells to launch the big damaging dozer weapon strikes, and I was just ended up everyone dying. So I did a run on easy, and that was quite easy. I made it all the way through, got to the city at the end, and found out what happened there. So let me just say, it gives you reasons to replay it after you've done that once. There's definitely you need to go and do it again. So I played it again on normal after that, and I don't know if it just adjusted but I'd unlocked a different dozer as well. So each like successful runs, you can unlock new dozers, and I found it a little bit easier on normal the next time, and or I was just getting better at the combat and playing more tactically and realizing what best crew members complement each other. So there is quite a bit to it, quite a bit of strategy and tactics to the combat. Again, if you played Banner Saga, you'll know that as well. It's something worth looking into if you wanted to get the best out of it. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of YouTube videos out there that actually go into depth on the combat and give you some good tips and strategies on how to face the enemies. So yeah, I liked it. I liked it a lot. I like the art style, like the setting, I like the story. And I think it's well worth playing if you're a fan of Banner Saga, if you're a fan of 2000 AD, if you're a fan of turn-based combat strategy games in general. I think it's well worth playing. Its full price is $14.99, and it's not a big game, but it is replayable. So like after you've done one run, there's reasons to do another. There's stuff to unlock, and there's still the story to finish, shall we say. So yeah, not big, but good replay value. If you're not too sure, I mean, I'd say wait for 40 to 50% off is good value if you're not sure whether you want to try it or not. But if you're a fan of these kind of games, then $14.99, the full price is pretty decent, is perfectly reasonable, I think. So that's Skyshine's Bedlam.